Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers. Philippe, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing great, Eric. It's good to see you. And how are you this week?
I am doing okay. I am looking forward to when the House closes for the holidays. It always feels like the official end of our political season when that happens. And that is supposed to happen on next Tuesday. We'll see.
Yeah.
There's lots of machinations. I don't know which one is correct, but one of them is happening in Ottawa, so we'll see what's going to happen. But we have a few things we're going to discuss today. We have that by-election that's happening on Monday, so we're going to do a little bit of an over-under on what to expect in that contest, as we usually do. But I guess we'll start with the federal polls, yes?
Yes, absolutely. So we had two polls. One, we had just the top line. It was Abacus data that leaked the top line to the Toronto Star, but the full numbers came out on Sunday. So if I can go through it, Eric, Nanos poll, the Nanos up tracker, nothing unusual. 42 Conservative, 23 Liberal, 21 NDP. So the NDP, still in the low 20s in the Nanos tracker. And then Abacus data, 44 Conservative, 21 Liberal, 20 NDP, with some interesting regionals from Abacus. Does anything for you stands out in these numbers? What do you see in these numbers, Eric?
Yeah, no, not really. The Nanos number is the exact same as it was last week. So I am curious to see if we're going to get anything else over the last few days, sort of the end of session, end of sitting kind of polling. We haven't heard from Ipsos in a little while.
Yeah.
There's a couple other pollsters we haven't heard from in a while. But one of the things we heard discussed really over the last week, I would say, has been just how bad the numbers have been for the Liberals. We talked about it, obviously, in last week's episode.
Yeah.
And just these kinds of 23s, 21, 20 that we saw as well last week, it does put the Liberals in a really bad position going into the end of the year when people might start to think about things. Yeah. And that's what I think is concerning for the Liberals, is that they're ending this year in the worst position that they've been all year. And that's not something that you take over the holiday break and get good results out of at the end of it, right? There's going to be people within that caucus that are going to be reevaluating whether they really want to stay on this seemingly sinking ship. There's going to be questions about the leadership still, again, always, until the next election. So these numbers themselves aren't all that surprising or shocking or anything different from what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. But they do feel like they could have some implications over the next few weeks.
Listen, I just just to go back in the recent history, because it's been, we've been singing the same tune for a year and a half, right? The Liberals have been sinking, the Conservatives are dominating in every region outside Quebec. But I looked at my numbers from late December last year in 2023, and we discussed on this podcast how much trouble the Liberals were in, and I looked at the average. It was 39 Conservative, 27 Liberal, and so we talked about how terrible it is terrible position it is for Liberals to be 12 points behind at 27%. Fast forward 1 year, the average is over 20 points for between the Conservatives and the Liberals, and we see no inclinations or direction or hints that it could get better. The situation regarding the economy, we talked about inflation. Inflation went down this year. The interest rate went down again. We saw the governor of the Bank of Canada this week lowering the rates again. So all these economic indicators have been getting slowly better in 2024, but it has not helped one iota the Liberals. And so we remember the 05-06 campaign. Paul Martin was heading into the Christmas break, leading in the polls against Stephen Harper and the Conservatives, and something happened during the Christmas break. Again, family and friends gather, they talk, and then boom, the numbers switch. I'm not saying they could switch here. I'm saying they could get even worse for the Liberals. So we'll see. But I don't see how they dig themselves out of it.
Yeah, That is the issue. There's not really an opportunity for them that you can imagine that suddenly something changes. There was the GST holiday thing that came out that they're announced. Every poll that we've seen, there's a number of polls, there's 3 of them that were done in the last couple of weeks, do not show that Canadians are happy about it. Not in the sense that I'm sure they're very happy to get 5% off of various things that is gonna, what they're going to buy. But it just seems like everybody sees right through it. The Leger poll we talked about last week, it's 70% of people saying it was an electoral gambit. The Angus Reid Institute, I think, had something around 86 or in the high 80s of people who thought that it was all politics or a lot of politics behind this. And I think that's the biggest issue. People will take it, sure, thanks.
Oh, yeah.
But they don't like being bought with their own money. And I think that's the issue here, is that no one's going to say, thank you, here's my vote along with my savings. It's just every poll we've seen suggests that people don't really think this is a great idea and that they see through it. So that's not going to move the dial. There's the stuff with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Is that going to move the dial? That is a wild card. It's hard to know how people are going to react to it. But a 21-point lead, you're not going to suddenly get 10 to 12% of the population deciding that, oh, okay, in the end, I'm just going to go back to the Liberals. It just seems unlikely. It just seems impossible. It's just too hard of a mountain for them to climb at this stage.
I mean, it is a wild card, but I'm playing the odds here. I mean, this is a podcast called The Numbers. If nothing that the Liberals have done throughout 2024 has changed the numbers, or the numbers got worse for them, why would this change anything? I mean, it made the news for not always good reasons this week. I mean, I said this last week. I just hope that the mainstream news media doesn't completely overreact to anything that Donald Trump says, just anything. Or it was a story that Elon Musk said that that Trudeau was a fool yesterday. Who cares? So I mean, if you think that the Trump administration, past and future, are not just bullies that will do that to anybody, who cares who's in who's sitting in the PMO in Ottawa? It doesn't matter, but. The optics are bad, and I keep looking into the numbers. We followed the polls all year, and every time was like, okay, it got a little worse. Could it get better? Could it get better? And it never did. At some point, again, I'm baffled that the Liberal caucus is letting this slide. There was a mild revolt, a very mild revolt in November that went nowhere. Thing is, it's not too late to change leaders for the Liberals. They could hold a leadership convention in the spring, but it doesn't seem that they're heading that way.
Yeah, no, we've talked about it before. Yeah. When the Ontario PCs were the government in waiting, they were leading in the polls. Patrick Brown was the leader. Yeah. There was that big scandal foo-for-ah that happened in January of 2018. And by March, Doug Ford was the leader of the party, and by June, he was the premier. That's right. You can have this kind of thing happen pretty quickly. You can get interesting candidates to come forward. Like that was an interesting race. They had Christine Elliott, Doug Ford, Carolyn Mulrooney. Yeah. That was a good series of candidates. There's no reason why you couldn't have a leadership race that would take 3 months. And by March, you have a new leader, comes forward with a new budget, maybe gets it passed by the NDP, and is still leader by the time the scheduled election happens in October. Like that is still possible. It just requires one thing. A resignation from the Prime Minister. And
that too.
It's still the case that he will give every indication that he's sticking around until the second that he says he isn't, right? Yeah. So we don't really know. But it still does seem like he very much wants to stay on. Maybe you can believe that if it's, he's a good campaigner and the contrast between him and Poilievre could help the Liberals. But can you really imagine that getting them up over 25 or even 26? Like it just seems like a little bit of wishful thinking. And again, as we've mentioned a lot of times, it's not a strategy. And we've seen no indication from Pierre Poilievre that he's going to trip over himself and blow up his lead. There's, questions about whether he's being prime ministerial enough right now with this stuff with Donald Trump. But it doesn't matter. Voters don't really care that much. He's the opposition leader. And every poll we see shows the same numbers for the Conservatives, 42, 44%, and Poilievre's personal ratings haven't really changed. So,
Yeah.
what do you wait? What's the plan? And there just doesn't seem to be one.
And plus, next week, I mean, it's been hidden a bit in the news. I guess it's because it's close to the Christmas and holiday break. But federal by-election in BC, in Cloverdale, Langley City, lower mainland of British Columbia. So this was a Liberal seat by a very close margin in 2021. The Liberals won it in 2015, lost it in 2019, won it back in 2021. So I think we expect the Liberals to lose this one pretty handily too. We'll see how the numbers turn out. But we're talking about by-election defeats, not just losses, but net defeats in Toronto, in Montreal, and then in the lower mainland. And we had also Durham in Ontario, which was not the Liberal seat, but when that by-election happened, we saw the swings pretty much confirmed what we had seen in the polls. And of course, we think that there will be a Halifax by-election somewhere in the spring if there's no general election. So the Liberals are just aligning defeats in key spots of the country where they used to do very well. And I don't know, you take the hint at some point, but...
It is funny that this by-election on Monday, which is going to take place at the same time as the fall economic statement, so maybe it gets buried a little bit, which might not be by accident, but it's almost certainly going to be a loss for the Liberals.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that everybody's expecting it means it won't have much of an impact. But it should, right? Because this is the kind of riding that the Liberals need to form a minority government, right?
Yep.
When we talked about La Salle-et-Mar and Toronto-St. Paul's, those are ridings that, they should win when they're at 40 seats, not at, when they're 140. But Cloverdale, Langley City is one of those kinds of seats that is in that 140 to 160 range. So the fact that they are probably going to lose it pretty badly on Monday is an indication that they're not in contention for government. So that's a bit of a problem, but it's almost expected because everybody already thinks that anyway, right? So the impact of it is going to be relatively limited. Should we talk about Cloverdale, Langley City then?
Yes, we should. I mean, the thing is, we usually, when we have by-elections, Eric and I play a little game of over-under. It's not highly scientific, but we try to, we look at our projections, we look at the regional, provincial, national swing, just to have an interesting line. And although our over-unders were not all perfect in the past by-elections, especially Toronto-St. Paul and La Salle-et-Mar-Verdun, our lines were really good. Go back and watch our lines. They were pretty good. So, Eric, I figured we could do the same thing for the three main parties.
Sure.
Because I don't think the Greens or the PPC will be a factor unless, there's a tremendous surprise here. So, in 2021, Eric, the Liberals won this riding, 39%. The Conservatives, 3 points behind at 36%. And the NDP was just a shade under 20%. So, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the incumbent Liberal? Where do we start here?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay.
39%, like you said, is what they had last time. I don't think they're getting anywhere close to that.
No.
So what I'm going to be looking for is whether they can at least beat their polls in this kind of riding. So the line I'm going to set is more based on where we would expect them to be based on the polling in British Columbia. And it's the kind of number that is pretty bad for them because it means they would lose pretty much everything except some of those ridings in maybe Surrey and Vancouver. And even then, I'm not sure. But the line I'm going to set is pretty low. I'm going to put it at 24%. So this is really a loss. Low. This would represent a loss of 15 points for the Liberals.
Damn.
And, that's not... But, what did they get in La Salle-et-Mar-Verdun, which was supposed to be a key riding? Got like 27?
They had 27, yeah.
Yeah. 24% Cloverdale, Langley City. What do you think?
Listen, Eric, when we discussed this, we did not discuss our lines beforehand for those people who are watching us right now or listening to us. I was thinking you would put the line as low as possible to make me take the over. And And 24% is a good line. Right now in my model, I have them at 27 with a huge margin of error, of course, because we don't have hyper-local data. So that would be a loss of 15 points for the Liberals. They lost, 9 points in Toronto-St. Paul. They lost 15 or 16 in La Salle-Verdun. They didn't, provincially, the Conservatives did really well in that area. I think I have to take the under. Yeah, I'm taking the under. Yeah.
Wow.
What about you? Is the line low enough that you're taking the over here?
I think that the Liberals are going to have a lot of trouble getting their vote out. I don't think there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm. Their candidate is not a well-known candidate. And the BC Conservatives just took over, I think, 50% of the vote in October in that election.
Yeah.
But
15 points?
I'm wondering what happens with the NDP vote, if it comes out or not. And
well,
if the NDP vote is depressed, then maybe the Liberal vote just looks higher by comparison.
Yep.
I will take a mild over. Like a 25, 26% maybe, which is still a huge loss. But the thing is with this riding, I looked at it.
Yeah.
So it swung around, as you said. They won in 2015, lost in 2019. They won it again in 2021. Before 2015, when was the last time the Liberals held this part of the Lower Mainland?
It had to be the Chrétien era, right? No? It was a reform? Tell me.
The last time they won this before 2015 was 1949.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
Louis Saint Laurent. Oh.
It isn't exactly friendly Liberal territory. It's actually a surprise that they were able to win it, I think, in 2015. Yeah. So it could be a reversion to their weakness that they should have in this part of British Columbia. But maybe I say they dropped 12 points, 13 points, which is still catastrophic. So I'll take them, like I said, a mild over.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Huh.
I was surprised. I kept on going back. Well, surely they won it in the 68. No. Okay. Well, surely they won it. No. 49.
So no Trudeau Senior, no Pearson, no Chrétien.
Nope.
Really? Okay. Wow. That's interesting.
So let's do the. I'll leave the Conservatives to you at the end.
Okay.
Just to keep everybody at the edge of their seat right now. So the NDP.
May I preface this for a second here?
You may.
Because we usually, in the last two by-elections, again, Toronto-St. Paul and La Salle-Verdun, we purposefully put the line really low. And I remember you frowning. It's like, wow, that is really low for the NDP. And they were right on it because they don't perform well in by-elections. They're not competitive. And I don't think we expect the NDP to win this. But so I was trying to imagine where you would put the line. So I just wanted to preface this with you. So go ahead, show me where's the line here.
So normally we do put the NDP low in by-elections because they tend to do pretty poorly in by-elections. But the BC NDP, still got something like 30-something% of the vote in this riding or this area, where John Aldag ran because he was the Liberal MP who quit. This is why the by-election is happening. He ran for the BC NDP and lost. And if the Liberal vote is going down a lot in British Columbia, a lot of it's going to go to the Conservatives, but some of it is going to go to the NDP. Okay. And the NDP has been holding its vote more or less in British Columbia. Yep. So I'm going to put the line a little bit lower than their last result. I'm going to put it at 19%.
19. So they had 19.9%. In 2021 in that riding. I'm slamming the under. Like, no hesitation here. You make good points. Yes, the NDP could take some of that Liberal vote, but a vote just before Christmas, I'm slamming the under. No hesitation for me.
I want to be interesting. I want to be different. So I'm going to take the over.
Okay.
Because I'm going to say BC is the one place where the NDP is doing well. We have seen some individual polls where they're actually doing better than they did last time.
Yep.
If there's going to be a movement from the Liberals to the NDP in parts of the country, I think British Columbia would be number one on that list. So I'm going to take, again, a mild over, a very mild over. They still might end up losing support from the last time in terms of their vote share, but maybe they'll beat 19%. But you know what? I kind of think that both parties are going to be under even our lines. I think they're both going to underperform, but I'm going to go with the over anyway.
Okay, so you have the Liberals and the NDP over. Maybe if you so I think maybe you're hedging here. So okay, the Conservatives, 36% last time. The Conservatives are up in BC, but recently we haven't seen provincial numbers. We haven't seen like the 50, 52 that we saw, I think, in the summer and the fall. It's closer to the low 40s right now. But okay, so my projection right now has them at 53, which is a tad high. I think it's a bit too high. But considering that you think the Liberals and NDP will do a little better than our lines, I am going to put the Conservatives at 53%.
There I think I'm going to take the under.
That's a plus 17 from their election.
Yeah. Because in my projection, I think I have them at 47 right now.
Okay.
In that riding. I do think that part of my calculation is that because the Greens didn't have a candidate last time, and they'll have one. They have one this time. And they'll take a chunk of the vote, so they're going to lower everybody else's a little bit.
Yeah.
Not because they're taking those votes, but just because they're going to have a bigger share. I think that the 47 I have is low.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would put him up to 53.
53 is a bit high, yeah. I agree.
What if we put the line at 50? Because 50, I think, is going to be a psychological barrier for them. If you can win this with a majority of the vote.
The thing is, if it's 50, I'm taking the over without hesitation. 53, I'm a bit nervous. We could move the line at 51. There you go. I'm taking the over at 51. Are you taking the under?
I'll take the under.
Okay.
I'm going to guess 49.9.
If that is it, you look like a soothsayer. Okay, so either way, 51. Yeah.
Either way, we're talking about the Conservatives getting somewhere around 50% of the vote, and we're kind of expecting the Liberals to have half of that.
Yeah.
That's going to be a stinging rebuke and a defeat that is going to be brushed off pretty quickly because people kind of expect it, as we do here, that the Liberals will lose this seat by 20 to 30 points. But yeah, I'm curious about it. We got a couple questions related to this, I think, in the mailbag that we'll get to in that episode, but I'm not sure who's coming out to vote on December 16th.
Yeah.
A month and a half after the provincial elections.
The most
in
motivated.
a by-election that is pretty unnecessary.
Yeah.
When you think about it was just about Aldag wanting to run provincially, which he didn't
failed
successfully do. So you could see some big swings just based on who comes out to vote. Because if only the Conservatives are motivated to vote, maybe they hit 55. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, this is going to be, I think, a bit of a slaughter for the Liberals, and we'll go over the results a little bit. But out of all of the by-elections, I think this one is the one that I'm least going to be looking at out of the recent ones in terms of what it means for where things are in the country and in the Lower Mainland especially.
And we apologize to our many Western listeners. Eric and I both live in the East, and the counting will start at midnight in our time. I mean, I'm okay to stay up at midnight. I'm not okay to stay up until 2 a.m. on a weekday. I'm working the next day. So we won't do a live stream this time. But we did the live stream for the general in BC. And, that was a lot of fun. But we're going to skip this one, but we promise you we will, analyze and deconstruct all the numbers in our next week's episode. So
yeah. All right, let's move to some provincial stuff. We had the quarterly polling from the Angus Reid Institute on the approval ratings of the premiers. A few interesting results. We have one new entrant, Susan Holt of New Brunswick. She kicks off her premiership with 54% approval, which is what 23 points higher than where Blaine Higgs was in the last
Yep.
in the last Angus Street Institute one before his defeat. And we see some honeymoon bumps for re-elected premiers Tim Houston up 14 points to 55%, and Scott Moe up 7 points to 52%, almost matching exactly the share of the vote that the Sask Party got.
Yep.
But who's at the top and increasing?
Yep.
Lob Canoe of Manitoba, 67% approval rating, the highest it's been, and now he's been there for a year. This is a good honeymoon for the Manitoba Premier.
Absolutely. 67 approval. We haven't seen such numbers since, I think, the pandemic, when we had some premiers walking on clouds, such as Monsieur Legault. 67 is, in a polarized society, 67% approval is really high wherever you stand. Closing out soon. It was in September, the election, so it's soon a year and a half, and Monsieur Canu's still in the honeymoon. But Eric, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the bottom of the list.
Such a downer, man. Come on.
There are two premiers right at the bottom in the 30s. Legault at 36% approval, down 3 points since the last quarterly poll. And Ford, last place, going up a little bit, 3 points, but at 34% approval. In the previous quarterly, should I say, the bottom was Ford and Higgs was soundly defeated, even though we talked how the New Brunswick map still favors the PC, and then he was soundly defeated. Ford is at the very bottom of this, and yet I think you and I have Ontario projections that put the Ontario PCs in a 90-seat range. Do you still have that range right now?
I think I have 91 or 93.
Yeah, okay, me too. I'm in the low 90s. So, what do we make of this?
I think it goes back to what we've said before, that Ford benefits from a gooey middle that doesn't really care. They don't hate him. They don't love him. He's fine. Yeah. And I think that he still benefits from that a lot, because we had the poll from the Abacus data.
Yep.
And see if I can have this information. I don't know if they included it. They might not have here.
Oh, hang on here. You mean the satisfaction numbers from for the opposition parties?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can.
No, for Ford himself. So
okay.
From just because they have a neutral number, but they have a 37% positive review of Doug Ford. Negative was 43. So he's got probably about 15% of the population that is neutral on him, and I think those neutrals tend to keep the PCs afloat.
Yeah.
Because even in the Angus Reid poll, like if you look at the breakdown of how intensely people view this, you still have 45% of the population in Ontario that say they either moderately approve or moderately disapprove. And I would have loved to see some voting intentions among those moderately disapprove, because I bet you the PCs are doing okay enough.
Yeah.
And it keeps them afloat. So it is remarkable that out of all the premiers on the list, the one at the bottom, if another election happened today,
it's safe.
I'd bet on Doug Ford being reelected. I wouldn't bet on François Legault being reelected. And I'd be pretty iffy on a bet on Andrew Furey, David Eby, or Daniel Smith, who are all at 46% approval rating. It's just a testament to the split vote in Ontario. And like I said, that okay with Doug Ford vote in Ontario, which I think is pretty huge.
The Abacus poll for Ontario has to be devastating for both the Liberals and the NDP, right? I mean, the PCs are leading among every age group. They're leading among women, among men. They're leading in every region. I mean, okay, the North doesn't have a big sample size, so Abacus doesn't show it. But I see Toronto, like the 416, not the Toronto metropolitan area, right? 45% for the PCs, 30% for the Liberals. I mean, this is the city of Toronto where at least it should be close. And okay, maybe those numbers are a tad high for the PCs. We'll see what the average of polling does. But and the 20-point lead for the PCs in the GTA, I'm thinking that our 90-seat projection may be a bit low. If those numbers go to the ballot box, it's closer to 100 than it is to 90. And if you scroll down that Abacus poll, so relationship between Ontario provincial vote and views of Justin Trudeau, which I thought was interesting, right? Because obviously we know that in Abacus polling, Justin Trudeau is polling really low, his personal numbers. But in the neutral category, so those who are, Justin Trudeau, not good, not great, not bad either, just neutral, the PCs still get 23% of the vote from these people.
Yeah.
So we talked before about the Trudeau-Ford voter. I think there are much fewer of them today, but it was a thing. I mean, all these seats that Trudeau won handily in 21 and 2019, the PCs, the Doug Ford PCs did very well. So this PC base is just so strong. And as you said, there's a mushy middle in Ontario that is fine with it. And until they see an opposition leader that they really like, Ford is going to be in power, because that's not the case right now. So,
yeah, and the recent news we've seen related to the tariffs, with Doug Ford kind of taking a harder line, I kind of think that's going to help him. I think that he is, so far, it seems he's trying to take on a bit of a mantle of, the biggest premier in terms of the provinces and the most important premier. And I think that that's going to work out well for him. Just kind of taking a bit more of a bigger role in this debate. So I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers actually go up. And so we see some of, especially his personal numbers. I'm not sure if the PCs can really get much higher than what they were in this poll, which was what?
42?
They're at 43%.
43, my God.
Yeah, I don't know if they can really get that much higher than that. But I wouldn't be surprised if in the next series of polls, we see Doug Ford's personal approval ratings getting a little bit closer to where the PCs are. And then this question about how can the PCs be doing so well when they're otherwise doing so poorly in terms of the popularity of the premier, I think might go away. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. It is an opportunity for Doug Ford.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all lining up really well for an early election.
To the surprise of no one here.
Yeah, be Captain Canada for a few weeks and then go to the polls in January or February and benefit from a, once again, perfectly divided opposition vote.
Yep.
And I'd say, as you say, maybe even weaker than it was before in terms of its division. Because you can almost look at some of these numbers and there's not really a concentration of support for either of the parties anywhere in Ontario, right? So that's not going to be good in a first-past-the-post system.
Eric, to pick up on something you said and to transition here, you said, okay, so there are three leaders, three premiers in the Angus Street poll that are in the 40s. So there's Mr. Eby in BC, just re-elected. Majority, but by a hair. There's Mr. Fury in Newfoundland and Labrador, who's going to the polls at some point in 2025 at 46%. And there's Daniel Smith at 45% approval. But there's a by-election in Alberta next week that hasn't been talked about much, I think.
At least by us.
Well, yeah, by us, but I think I read news from all over the country, and it doesn't seem to be a huge story, except very locally, and I think it should be a bigger news, because this is not Fort McMurray or Foothills, or, this is an NDP seat that has been an NDP seat for a decade. It was Shannon Phillips, her name is. Mm-hmm. 3 times she won the riding for the NDP in 2015, in 2019 when the NDP lost, and won it back again in 2023. And what do we see here? Because the leader of the NDP, Monsieur Nenshi, is not running in this by-election. We talked about this before. I'm not sure the NDP will take this. The numbers haven't been really great. And Miss Smith, if she wins this by-election, I think we should, at least for now, it can change quickly, but at least for now, we can say that she should be one among the safest premier in the country. Am I wrong about this?
Well, she got a big vote of approval from UCP members.
She did.
What was it, 91, 93%, something like that, which you don't often see from a conservative party in Alberta. They like to eat their leaders.
Yes, they do.
So she is seemingly not going to be toppled by her own party, which has historically been the biggest risk for a Alberta premier. And yeah, I mean, you look at the Angus Reid Institute poll for Daniel Smith. Her numbers have been pretty stable, right?
Yeah.
45% her approval rating. And if you go back to before the last election, she's been at 45 to 47% pretty consistently. So that support seems to be pretty safe. We haven't seen a voting intentions poll out of Alberta for months now. So we don't really have a good idea of what's going on, which is why I think this by-election is going to be super interesting. So 54% for the NDP last time, 42.5% for the UCP. So there does need to be a pretty big swing for the UCP to take this. You need a 6-point swing in order for the UCP to win it. Shannon Phillips, even in 2012, she was the candidate then, and the NDP wasn't on the radar, did really well in this riding.
Yeah.
So there is a NDP vote here. Could have been also a Shannon Phillips vote. I am curious to see what happens. So in the scenario that the UCP wins this, what does that say about Ned Nenchi's leadership? Is he going to be questioned? I think he will be, about why he didn't put his name forward to at least try to give a boost to the NDP brand in the riding.
Okay, so I always give the benefit of the doubt when leaders and strategists make what I think is a questionable decision. I give the benefit of the doubt because we haven't seen local numbers in Lethbridge, but maybe they have. Maybe they see that it would be a very close race and that the former mayor of Calgary did not boost. Losing the incumbent, losing Ms. Phillips, hurt the NDP, and having Mr. Nenchi run there had no benefit except risking tainting the record of your brand new leader. So I get the reason why they chose not to put him there. But it is an NDP seat. It's not like you have to gain a close seat. You have to defend. And if the NDP doesn't win Lethbridge-West, tell me which map they're using that the NDP could win the next general election. Because there is none, right? I mean, I think they won as much as they could in Calgary. Perhaps they could do 2-3 more seats better, but they need more than 2-3 additional seats. Lethbridge-West is a must. And so, I'm looking forward. And also, it's the date of the by-election is
a week before Christmas.
Yeah, it's when most students in the university there are probably back home and not in the city. I guess that's part of the game, right? I mean, being the incumbent lets you choose when to have by-elections. One of the reasons why the idea that we should have fixed date by-election, which, by the way, is your idea. You put it up first, and I agree with it. It's never happening because no governing party will take this advantage that you have to choose the by-election, maybe to surprise your opponents.
We'll see. Elections Quebec, in its recent report, did suggest having fixed by-elections, and they said that the parties were on board. So maybe it's going to happen in Quebec, and then maybe it'll sweep the country as people get really excited about these fixed by-elections. A fixed date in March or April, a fixed date in October, and that's when it is. Everybody knows what the date is. Such a great idea. Mm-hmm. It should be the law of the land.
But it won't happen. No way. No chance.
Our leaders are just cowardly.
Yep.
They are. Yep. They need to adopt my idea, and they need to do it right now.
Call it the Eric Grenier bill. There you go.
I like that.
Me too. But so what do we think? Who wins this next week?
Oh, I still think that this has been, as you said, an NDP riding for a while.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've really lost enough to lose the seat. Their candidate is known in the city because he was the NDP candidate in Lethbridge East, and he came pretty close. And he's a former councillor. The UCP candidate, also a councillor, a former police chief, so he's got some name recognition. Yeah, but I think it will actually be closer than it was last time. I think the UCP is going to close the gap, but I still kind of think the NDP holds it by a bit of a whisker, enough that they can move on and look ahead to next year. But I don't feel super confident.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 65% chance.
I'll give it a 50-50. I think, well, okay, if you
I
force
need a
me.
51-49.
Okay, then the UCP is 41-49.
51-49. All right.
The NDP hasn't gained from past election. And the UCP seems to be in a strong position. And the fact that the leader did not go in there and defend an NDP seat, for me, I don't have inside information. But my impression is that they have internal numbers. They saw, don't run there because you'll be humiliated. Because imagine if he did go, he does go, and then he loses. Ooh, that looks bad on you. That looks bad on your record. And they don't want to burn the new leader. So I'm thinking the UCP wins this by this much. But hey, we don't know. We haven't seen local numbers, and I'm pretty sure we won't. Sometimes Main Street Research does those riding polls before prior elections. I don't think we're going to see one this close to Christmas. It's not going to be. It would be too risky. So.
No early Christmas present for us. All right, we're going to close with our number of the week. Let me go first because mine is a little bit closer to something we've already discussed, and it is 42%. So 42% comes from the Angus Reid Institute poll. It's the percentage of Ontarians who strongly disapprove of Doug Ford. Another 20% somewhat disapprove. The 42% strongly disapprove is the highest in the country. We talk about, lame duck premiers like François Legault or some that are, in trouble looking ahead to future elections. We don't say that about Doug Ford, but he's got the highest number of strongest disapprove in the country among all the premiers, and he is one of the safest premiers. It is just a really interesting reflection of how the political system works, what it says about his opposition, what it says about the electoral system. But I just find it interesting that the most intensely disliked premier in the country, also one of the safest ones, and about to win re-election.
Yep, a third majority for the first time in almost a century in Ontario. Interesting. My number of the week, 13. 13% answered yes, I would, to the question, would you or would you not like Canada to become the 51st state? And I know I just railed about how don't overreact to every little dumb thing that Donald Trump says. But, we had to ask the question. It's fun to have data. 13% said yes, I would. So 1 in 8 Canadians said they would. So it's clearly no. The gender split was interesting. 19% of men said yes. 7% of women said yes. Regionally, there's not that big a difference. A bit higher in Alberta and the prairies. 19% in Alberta. And then when you go by voting intentions, 10% of Liberals said yes. 6% of New Democrats said yes. 12% of Bloc voters said yes. Interesting. And
you do you.
Yeah. And 21% of Conservatives. So I'm looking at this, looking at gender split, looking at the numbers for the Conservatives. I think it would be fair to say that a quarter of Conservative men in this country would be open to be annexed by the U.S. Well, you make of that what you will. But I think, even though I think it was a dumb suggestion, a dumb joke, and something that the media overreacted to, I'm very glad to have numbers, to have data on this. Because I'm pretty sure this is going to get tracked. And so maybe next year, when the tariffs hit, when the impact on the economy is known, looking forward to see if those numbers go up or down. So,
you know what my view is on this? This is one of those questions that'll move around based on who the premier, the prime minister is, and who the president is. If you ask this again in a year when Pierre Poilievre is probably the prime minister, I bet you those conservative
are you
numbers...
calling the federal election right? Oh my God.
Yeah, we're going to call it right now. I'm just saying that if that happens, those conservative numbers are going to drop like a stone because suddenly their guys here, so they're fine with it. Right now, there's that question of, well, if I have to choose between Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau, and I'm a conservative that likes Donald Trump, I would rather be in Donald Trump's country. It's one of those questions like in the States. Suddenly, the economy people think is a lot better.
Oh, yeah. Right away.
Just Republicans, though. Yeah. Republicans think the economy is doing a lot better in the United States. People will change their views based on who is in office, and I think that's what's happening here. Like New Democrats, 6%. if it was Kamala Harris who had won that election, I bet you it would be a bit higher than 6%.
Would you?
And
Because
that
if
conservative number would be closer to 6.
If
I
I
just think a
follow
lot of
your-
it is partisanship.
If I follow your logic, though, when Pierre Poilievre's become prime minister, do you think a higher share of liberals would like to be annexed by the United States? Maybe not.
At that point, no, because they have to choose between they gotta
Poilievre
choose,
and Trump.
between two that they don't like. So anyway, I
Anyway,
just
good
think
Léger poll. Thank you, the Léger team, for this poll.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you are listening, leave us a rating review on the podcast apps. We don't have a lot of comments, ratings, and we'd like to have a few more. So
Good ones,
please
yeah.
take a minute to do that. We'd appreciate that. And we're going to record our mailbag episode right after this. We got tons of questions. I don't know how. We're going to have to cut some. There were just so many. But if you want to listen to that, you can go to thenumberspod.ca to join the Patreon. And then we have our mailbag episode every week. And in 2 weeks, we're going to have a special episode that'll be just for members. We're going to take a bit of a Christmas break, a holiday break in terms of the regular show, but we'll have that episode up for our members. And next week, Philippe, it is the 4th annual
That's right.
over-under competition. We will find out who made the best predictions for 2024, and we
Yeah.
will make our predictions for 2025.
That was me. Yeah.
It's going to be with a federal election on the schedule. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking forward to that, Philippe, and we'll chat again in 7 days.
All right. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Merci beaucoup, tout le monde, and merci, Eric.